Hello, I'm Locke, Meredith. I'd like to invite you to join me on the next Legal Lines, where my guest is again Louisiana Supreme Court Justice Jeff Hughes. Justice Hughes is going to talk to us about the difference in the roles of being a trial court, appellate court, and a Louisiana Supreme Court justice. He's also going to talk to us about two issues kind of facing Louisiana right now: judicial criminal reform, rather, and also this unanimous verdict, whether we need it or not in certain criminal proceedings. So join us on the next Legal Lines with Louisiana Supreme Court Justice Jeff Hughes.
One of the reasons I love this firm is that the moment you walk through the doors, you're so much more than business. You're family, which means we're going to fight for you as if you're family.
Most of the people we represent come from past clients who have referred friends, family members, other people they love to us to represent them in the same way we represented the persons who referred them.
We all pull from each other's experiences, knowledge, expertise in the law so that we get you not only a solution to your problems, but the best solution that we can come up with for your problems.
Knowledge is power, and the folks who know what they're doing empower you. They enable you to make the right kind of decisions that best serves you. And that's our number one goal, frankly. Our number one ministry is to serve you.
Hello, I'm Locke Meredith. Welcome to Legal Lines. I'm very pleased to have back on the show a Louisiana Supreme Court Justice, Jeff Hughes. Jeff, it's wonderful to see you again.
Locke, thank you.
I very much appreciate you coming back in and kind of demystifying the court, the big court in the state of Louisiana. And just give the folks a background, because what I love is just kind of salt of the earth, kind of living in family and scenario. And now in the judicial world, the pinnacle of success or power, or however you want to define it.
Yeah, strange things happen. Yeah, because I started out as a solo practitioner in Walker when I was the only lawyer in Walker. So it's
that was a long time ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It's you look back now and it's kind of exciting to have made it to the Supreme Court, but I like to remember where I came from too. So
I read something, and again, I'm very sorry for your dad's passing, but he lived a long life. But I read a line where he looked at you and hugged you, and he said, "What's next?"
Yeah, you know, that was the kind of a guy he was. He was always encouraging, but also kind of like
always pushing
a little bit too. So that was the night that I was elected to the Supreme Court, and when we finally knew the results that I knew I had won. I looked at him and he looked at me, and glad we were, I got that chance before he passed away, but he came up to me and said, "What's next?" So,
yeah, and of course he was very successful in his own right.
Yeah, he did a lot. He went hard. He was a World War II veteran.
What a great generation we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. Those guys were a lot tougher than we are today.
Amen.
But he actually retired 4 times. So
At 93, I guess he did.
Yeah, and he was not the kind of guy to sit around and do nothing. So
wonderful story. Well, so in Walker, and as I recall, you were in private practice handling kind of everything, criminal, family, whatever walked in the door for over a decade, right?
10 years of, actually I clerked here in Baton Rouge for Judge Palazzolo for a year, and then I worked for
federal court at that point.
Right, and then worked for a firm here in Baton Rouge for a year, but then I went out on my own in Walker and did that for 10 years before I ran for judge. So we had everything that walked in the door you can imagine.
Well, it's interesting, and it really stuck in my head the first time I heard this, was just that, somebody had kind of been chosen by the powers who pulled the political levers as a judge, and apparently the bar, and particularly you, didn't appreciate his temperament and the way he treated folks.
Yeah, he was a very nice guy outside the courtroom, but when he got inside the courtroom, he was not the best. He liked to yell and scream, and he would embarrass people in the whole front of the whole courtroom. So
right.
There was some sentiment for somebody to run against him. And actually, I look back now. I was not the one. I was going to support somebody else, and they kind of the powers that be talked them out of running, and that really kind of ticked me off. I said, "Well, doggone, I'm going to run." I didn't really think I had a chance to win, but lo and behold, here I am. So.
And so you were on the trial court for, was it 14 years?
14 years
Wow.
as the trial court, right. That was Livingston, Tangipahoa, and St. Helena. Was
Now, what's it like to
21st
do the
district.
circuit court? Because that's a little different, is it not, than you know, over here in East Baton Rouge Parish where they only have to sit in one courtroom?
Yeah, we moved around. You know, we'd be a week in Amite, a week in Livingston, and we might go to Greensburg every once in a while because there was a lot less
Small,
population,
right.
less cases. But we were constantly on the move a week at a time. And we did everything: civil, criminal, traffic, murder,
Good
family,
gosh.
juvenile, the whole, everything there is in the legal system we did as general jurisdiction judges.
Now, do you find the fact that you did have that kind of practice and also dealt with that on the trial court, that gives you kind of a perspective on the Supreme Court that maybe is unique and needed?
Yeah, I'm glad I did it. I mean, a lot of judges have been assistant DAs and then ran for judge, and they've maybe never closed a real estate deal in their life, you know.
Right.
So I'm fortunate to have had a varied background, I think.
And the bottom line is, y'all do deal. Y'all render decisions on every aspect of the law and administrative law, correct?
Right. Yes. We're doing everything from DWIs to death penalty murder cases. So.
All right, and so obviously it's a beneficial background to have. Then you were on and of course we've talked before, but it's the trial court. You're kind of like a frontline soldier. You know, you're up there getting all the information and listening to the fighting and being the ref, and you know what it's like. And the appellate court's a little different.
Yeah, I liken it to the trial court's what everybody sees on TV. You got the judge, you got the jury, you got bailiffs and police officers and witnesses and lawyers, and it's in the courtroom. And it's kind of like being a kindergarten teacher, because you got to make sure everybody's on time, and make sure that, if the jury's going to have lunch, you got to order it at 11 o'clock, so it'll be there at 12 o'clock, and you don't want this side's witnesses sitting next to this side's witnesses, and it's all getting everybody to work together and make it run. And then you get to the Court of Appeal, and as Bob Downing said, it's like going from the MASH unit to the insane asylum. Because you get to the Court of Appeal and it's quiet and the phone's not ringing. Nobody's asking you to
No
get my boy out of
chaos.
jail, or Judge, can I talk to you? And it's all very, it's just a lot more slower, more quiet pace.
And the truth is, as I understand it, you've kind of been, you've been a scholar since, I guess, in a lot of ways you were born. Was your mom a teacher? Is that right?
Yeah, I had mother, grandmother, sister, and aunt.
You were doomed.
School teachers. But I loved history. I was a history major. Of course, I used to read history textbooks as a child for pleasure. So people think that might be kind of weird, but
It served you well, though.
Yeah, I just have always loved to read. I don't think anything more important for a kid, even today, than to learn how to read.
And of course, you were a National Merit Scholar in high school.
Well, I was a finalist, not a scholar is like the very top.
Good distinction. Okay.
Didn't quite make it that high. I was like the next to.
And the
next
salutatorian
rung,
of.
Yeah, I was salutatorian in my high school
me,
class. Right.
And then LSU Law Review. Academic scholarship, and so in the appellate court, all you're doing is kind of reading, as I understand it, based on our prior.
Yeah, it's different because you don't try the case over again. You just have a record typed up. They see the little lady typing in the courtroom. She's a court reporter. She types up a transcript, and we get the record. But you have a 3-judge panel too. It's not just one judge, and they read the record. And it's a random allotment of cases, so everybody gets an equal share of the cases, or who gets to write the main opinion. But in your 3-judge panel, like you're writing an opinion which you propose, and you send it to the other 2 judges. At the same time, they're working on a different case, so they send their 2 out, and they send their 2 out, and everybody reads it, and then you get together and discuss it. And if you see any changes or objections, you point that out. It's really kind of a team effort.
All right,
And
well,
then
we'll continue on the next segment. This is Locke, Meredith, Legal Lines. Louisiana Supreme Court Justice Jeff Hughes will be right back.
One of the reasons I love this firm is that the moment you walk through the doors, you're so much more than business. You're family, which means we're going to fight for you as if you're family.
Most of the people we represent come from past clients who have referred friends, family members, other people they love to us to represent them in the same way we represented the persons who referred them.
We all pull from each other's experiences, knowledge, expertise of the law so that we get you not only a solution to your problems, but the best solution that we can come up with for your problems.
Knowledge is power, and the folks who know what they're doing empower you. They enable you to make the right kind of decisions that best serves you. And that's our number one goal, frankly. Our number one ministry is to serve you.
Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke, Meredith, and I'm very pleased to have back on the show Louisiana Supreme Court Justice Jeff Hughes. Judge, let's dive back in. I should say Justice. You talked about how the appellate court, when you're on the appellate court, what, 8 years?
Yes.
The decision-making process, instead of it being just one judge like it is at the trial court, you got 3 judges, and you were describing the process of who writes the opinion and how the decisions are made.
Right, and we're all, it's truly a team effort, because if you see something wrong, you point it out, then that judge is glad, he'll fix it. Now, at the end of the day, if they don't agree, you sit down and vote, and if it's a 2-1, then the opinion passes. Of course, if it's 2-1 the other way, somebody, you give up that case and one of the other judges will write it because they're in the majority. Now, if it's to overturn the trial court, and these are just sort of general rules, but if it's to overturn the trial court, it has to be unanimous. It's sort of like the trial court gets a vote, and if he gets a vote at the Court of Appeal, then it's like 2-2.
Split.
So then you have a 5-judge panel to kind of break the tie. And then every once in a while you have an issue if you're going to overrule a precedent within that circuit, or if it's some constitutional issue or issue of big importance, you might have an en banc opinion, which all 12 of the Court of Appeal judges sit at one time, and somebody will write an opinion which all 12 judges have to sign off on.
All right, and in that decision, is it a majority?
Yeah, could be. And
so what happens if we got a split?
Then nothing happens. The trial court judgment will remain in place if it's a 6-6 split.
Goodness gracious.
And it's tricky, because when you have 12 judges, you need 7 for a majority.
Really interesting. So do y'all literally debate the legal issues if there are different opinions of interpretation?
Sure, that's what it's all about, especially on those en banc cases, because they're usually some big important issue, and there's a disagreement. So.
And it can involve millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, or whatever, life and death. I mean, our judiciary deals with every possible issue. It's just fascinating. Shift gears for me. You've now been at the Louisiana Supreme Court for what, 6 years?
This is my 6th year, yes.
And that was because Chief Justice Kitty Kimball, she became ill, suffered a stroke, and she needed to retire.
Yeah, she had a stroke, and I'm glad to say she's really doing great now.
I'm glad to hear that. I actually had another show with Chief Justice after that, and she was remarkable, and I'm glad you tell me, because I'm going to follow up with her.
I got to, we swore in a new judge in the 18th District around the first of the year, and she actually swore him in.
Oh, fantastic.
Did the oath by memory. Yeah.
She's something.
But anyway, she retired after 4 years of her 10-year term, so I did the back 6. This is my 6th year.
And so you would be running for re-election come November 6th, except you were unopposed.
Yeah, very fortunately.
I'm seeing a big smile. I know that's got to be
It's a relief, although I have to say I really enjoy a good election. You get out there and you get to see a lot of people and go places you don't normally go, and you get to go to a lot of different churches, and it's really... you couldn't do it all year round, but while you're doing it, it's a very enjoyable, uplifting experience.
Well, I'm still glad you didn't have to have an opponent.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
All right. Well, you've been there now for 6 years. Kind of just describe for us, if you can, just the day in the life of you as a Louisiana Supreme Court Justice.
again,
Maybe it's a week in the life, as
yeah,
you mentioned.
it's a totally different experience, because at the Court of Appeal, it's all about these opinions that we put out, because everybody has the right to an appeal from a district court. I mean, if you lose at the trial court, the lower level, you have the absolute right to appeal. So every appeal that comes, the Court of Appeal addresses. And when I was there, we wrote like 60 opinions per judge per year. I get to the Supreme Court, and you know, honestly, it was a little easier than being a trial court judge, although I enjoyed both. And I thought, well, this will be a little easier when I get to the Supreme Court. It didn't work out that way. I'm back working harder than I was at the Court of Appeal.
That's so surprising to hear, too. It's just, so what is it that makes it more time-consuming now?
The Louisiana Supreme Court works in the same fashion, more or less, as the U.S. Supreme Court, in that you do not have the absolute right to an appeal. We can pick and choose which cases we want to hear. So we get, on average, we look at about 100 writ applications. When you want to, if you disagree with the Court of Appeal decision, you file a writ application with the Supreme Court saying, please look at my case. I think the Court of Appeal got it wrong. And on average, we look at about 100 of those a week. Now, about 90 out of 100 get denied. But the thing is, you've got to read all 100 to know which 10 you're going to hear in court and which 90 you're going to deny.
So do you read them,
Yes.
Justice?
Yeah,
it's not a law clerk or somebody else?
Your law clerk cannot read it for you, and they cannot vote for you.
Interesting.
And you don't want to show up at the table. We usually meet on Tuesdays and Wednesdays every week to vote on that week's case, or the weeks previous that we've read, whether we're going to grant those writs. And if we grant them, in about, every 6 weeks we'll have oral argument in the courtroom where they write briefs and come and argue the case, and we write an opinion. But when you're sitting at that table, you've got to be prepared or you'll be embarrassed, and your law clerk cannot read it for you and they can't vote for you. So we spend every day of the week I am reading writ applications.
Good Lord. All right, so you indicated there's no guaranteed appeal to be accepted by the Louisiana Supreme Court. The writ is the position of the party seeking the Supreme Court to revisit the issue and hopefully, I guess, reverse the lower courts. Right. The only exception to that, though, is death case, correct?
Correct. Death penalties are automatically appealed to the Louisiana Supreme Court.
And so once again, y'all are handling the whole gambit of issues. Explain to folks about the kind of the administrative roles and hats that y'all wear.
Well, we do have a lot of administrative stuff. I can remember one of my colleagues, years ago at the district court saying, they're trying to turn us into social workers instead of just judges. But we oversee drug courts, reentry courts, veterans courts, also CASA, FINS, all of these programs that are designed really to keep people out of jail, because being in jail is a very expensive proposition for the taxpayer. I think it's something like $30,000 a year to house a prisoner in the state penal system.
And the recidivism rate is astronomical. I think it's like 70–80% typically. Is that too high?
I hope it's not that high. But you always want to reduce that rate.
And of course, recidivism is they commit the crime again and they're back in jail.
They're back in, correct.
And so, how would you divide your time up between the administrative versus the actual legal work that you do as a justice?
It's maybe like 25 to 30% is spent on just administrative stuff.
All right, well, we'll continue this on the next segment. This is Locke, Meredith with Louisiana Supreme Court Justice Jeff Hughes. We'll be right back.
One of the reasons I love this firm is that the moment you walk through the doors, you're so much more than business. You're family, which means we're going to fight for you as if you're family.
Most of the people we represent come from past clients who have referred friends, family members, other people they love to us to represent them in the same way we represented the persons who referred them.
We all pull from each other's experiences, knowledge, expertise of the law so that we get you not only a solution to your problems, but the best solution that we can come up with for your problems.
Knowledge is power, and the folks who know what they're doing empower you. They enable you to make the right kind of decisions that best serves you. And that's our number one goal, frankly. Our number one ministry is to serve you.
Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke, Meredith. Again, very pleased to have back on the show Louisiana Supreme Court Justice Jeff Hughes. Jeff, let's dive back in. So, kind of two big issues that are facing our state right now from a judicial standpoint is kind of the criminal justice reform that's taking place. I'd like to get your thoughts on that. And then also kind of the unanimous verdict issue that's almost on a national scale being discussed. The first one, the criminal justice reform, do you agree that it was worth doing? Is it appropriate?
Oh yeah, I think any effort to put people back to work and give them an incentive to have a life and not just go back to jail is a positive. There's always some bad apples in the barrel, and I know that some of the ones that were released early have now committed other crimes and they're back in jail. But I do think the effort is worth it. I've been to Angola. I've seen they have, for instance, a mechanics class at Angola where prisoners are trained to become certified, like a certified diesel mechanic.
Wow. And
they actually have jobs waiting for them when they get out. That's probably the biggest success, but they have other programs. But if you can train those prisoners up where they got a job when they get out, then they, if they got a job, they can find a place to stay, they can afford to buy food. They do not go back on you and I paying for their food and clothes and medical care, which if a prisoner does commit another crime and he goes back in, well, we're paying that $30,000 a year.
And you mentioned that earlier. The cost is $30, and drug courts. Judge Tony Marabello and I discussed this a lot, that the drug court finds folks and rehabilitates them and basically acts like their parent in a lot of ways, gives them skills to succeed out in society, and it costs at least one half, maybe even less than that.
Oh yeah, it's
the cost. And so from a financial standpoint, I understand that. For the folks who might have suffered the loss of a loved one or something like that, I can understand their turmoil. I'm not saying that's happened yet, I don't know. But my question is, do we know for a fact, because I know that's how this was sold to the legislature and all of us, are they taking the money that they were saving and are they using it to do what you're discussing and educating folks?
That's the key thing, and there's a legislative committee now that's looking into that, and I don't really know the final answer, but that's probably the most important part. Those savings that comes from that program have to be plowed back in to train these people and help them get out and be successful. And another factor is, I'm not sure exactly what criteria they use for the release programs, but you certainly have to, if somebody is a dangerous felon.
Yeah, they weren't supposed to be letting out known murders, that's for sure.
Right, and you don't always know. Maybe it was an armed robbery before, and when they get back out, then they commit a murder. But, there's some people that need to be put away for as long as possible. There just are those people, and you've always got to separate the sheep from the goats and put the bad people away, and we should never lose sight of that. But I do think the effort to get people who can get out and hold a job is worth trying.
I agree. And we know it works. We've seen it happen, whether it's in drug court or in the scenario you've described. It just has to be implemented. And I sure do hope and Senator Dan Claytor was instrumental in making a lot of that happen. And I hope Dan is able to make sure they do what they're supposed to do. Shifting gears a little bit, we were discussing earlier the unanimous verdict for Louisiana being beat up on for not having a unanimous verdict requirement. What are your thoughts?
Everybody seems to have jumped on that bandwagon. I'm a little concerned about unintended consequences. I'm concerned it may be a solution in search of a problem. and I'll say this, I mean, I've been at the Supreme Court now for 6 years, and I'd be willing to bet that I have voted to grant more writs for criminal defendants than the rest of the justices up there combined.
Really? And why? Tell me why.
I like, you know, it goes back to something that does not hold true today, but my grandmother used to say, it's an old, you know, I think it comes from Voltaire, better that 12 guilty men go free than one innocent man be imprisoned. Now, I don't think you could sell that today. I really don't. You could ask somebody if 12 innocent people went to jail to make sure you got one guilty man, they might say yes. But I like to make sure, I like to sleep at night if there's a question, a reasonable question. I want to make sure, get to the bottom of it, hash it out. If they're guilty, they need to be in jail.
Right.
But if we got the wrong person in jail, that means that the real perpetrators out there are still running around.
Very good point.
But anyway, so I'm all in favor. If there's a mistake and somebody's wrongfully convicted, it needs to be fixed. But I don't see that in the non-unanimous jury verdict. I'll give you a couple of examples. One, when Will Smith, the Saints football player, was shot. I mean, you had an African-American gentleman who shot another African-American gentleman after 2 car wrecks and some posturing, and one guy pulled out a gun and shot the other guy and his wife.
I remember reading.
He goes to trial. He's convicted of manslaughter, not murder, which he was tried for, on a 10-2 verdict. Well, it was an Orleans Parish jury. They had black people and white people, men and women, and the 2 who voted not to convict him were both white. We had a case last week that we're looking at. It's not final yet, so I'm not going to mention any names or details, but it was a murder case where you had DNA evidence and other physical evidence and witnesses, and he was convicted 10-2. It was not a death penalty case. That would have to be unanimous, but a 10-2 conviction. Now, if this law passes, that case would have to be tried over again, and I don't, you know, you had
Miscarriage of justice.
DNA evidence. You know, one person could cause a mistrial, even though it's clearly not called for. That being said, if it's a constitutional amendment, if it passes, I will follow the law, because I believe in the Constitution and the right of the people to make those decisions.
Let's shift gears a little bit. You know, we've got you know, a new United States Supreme Court justice nominee pending before the Senate, and President Trump recently nominated, and he was confirmed, Justice Gorsuch. And so, you know, the judiciary at the federal level has kind of got the spotlight on it in a lot of ways. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on our United States Supreme Court justices being appointed for life as compared to being accountable in some form or fashion.
Yeah, that's a tough issue, because it's not only the Supreme Court justices, it's the federal appeal court judges and the district court trial judges, federal, lifetime appointment. Of course, that's the way the founders of our country set it up. It does take off any pressure. You know, you can't really put millions of dollars into an election to try to beat somebody just because they made a decision you didn't like.
So trust the founders.
So that's
Justice
what I would
Hughes, it's been wonderful having you back on the show. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much.
Appreciate it. This is Locke Meredith Legal Lines. Supreme Court Justice Jeff Hughes, thanks for being with us.